Hello and welcome to the movie podcast review of The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. My name is Daniel. I'm one of your hosts today, and joining alongside me are my massively talented co-hosts, Shahbaz.
Hello, hello.
And Anthony.
Hello.
How are you both doing today?
I am doing well.
It's all again.
You know what? I'll be honest. I'm doing pretty well as well.
Well as well. Okay, I'll join you guys doing well. As well. As always, you can catch a brand new episode of the Movie Podcast every single Monday, and watch out throughout the week for our review episodes and all the latest movies and series. Make sure you follow us at the Movie Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Letterboxd, and don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, join our Discord, and write into the show at hello@TheMoviePodcast.ca. Check out our show notes for all of those links and more. We're playing a little bit of time traveling with this episode today, so there's probably a lot of new episodes and reviews, oh, I hope there are, that you could check out on the Movie Podcast feed right now. I also want to give a special shout out to all the work Anthony is doing on YouTube. Anthony, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I put videos on YouTube now.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Shay, what else is going on with us? We just launched some cool new threads, as the kids are calling it.
We launched some cool new digs. We've been rocking them. We've been showing them off. People have been like, "Hey, what is that you're wearing?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's the Movie Podcast merch." And they're like, "Wow, is that designed by Burberry?" And I'm like, "You're absolutely right, it is." But we're launching it at a fraction of the cost.
We are launching at a fraction of the cost. And if you want to save even more, if you want to use promo code MOVIE at checkout when you're checking out on our Bonfire site, you will get 10% off. So you will be able to save some money while also contributing to our show and helping us keep the lights and the mics on here at the Movie Podcast. But today is all about the unbearable weight of massive talent. This film stars Nicolas Cage as Nick Cage, Pedro Pascal, Sharon, Horgan, Ike Barinholtz, Alessandra Mastronardi. That's from Anthony. I need you to jump in here for me for this one.
Yeah, that sounds
okay.
Sounds good.
We'll take your word for it.
Kosher.
Jacob Scipio, Lily Sheen with Neil Patrick Harris and Tiffany Haddish. This film is releasing in theaters April 22nd by Mongrel Media and Lionsgate in the United States. And I want to say thank you to our friends at Mongrel Media for inviting us to watch this film. Now, Shahbaz, I'm going to get you to start us off with the synopsis.
Nicolas Cage stars as Nick Cage in the action comedy The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Creatively unfulfilled and facing financial ruin, the fictionalized version of Cage must accept $1 million offer to attend the birthday of a dangerous superfan. Things take a wildly unexpected turn when Cage is recruited by a CIA operative and forced to live up to his own legend, channeling his most iconic and beloved on-screen characters in order to save himself and his loved ones. With a career built for this very moment, the seminal award-winner actor must take on the role of a lifetime as Nick Cage.
Only a role that Nicolas Cage could play is himself. It was very intriguing. This film premiered at South by Southwest earlier in March. Anthony, I'm going to get you to start us off with your first reactions.
Growing up, I watched pretty much all of Nick Cage's Nicolas Cage's movies. And he's always had a soft spot in my heart, or I've always had a soft spot in my heart for him. And whenever I see him on screen, just growing up and seeing where his career kind of went, I always like to see him act, and I always like to see him do his characters in recently Pig and Mandy and so forth.
Spider-Verse as well too. Spider-Verse, yeah.
And then even Kick-Ass.
Yep.
Always forget he's in Kick-Ass. So yeah, I was super excited to see him in his movie about himself, playing himself in like a action adventure, which was a weird take. And when I saw this trailer a couple of months ago, I'm like, man, this looks pretty Nick Cage. This is like they're gonna play on all the tropes of Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I thought the movie was okay. I wasn't like blown away with what I saw. There was a lot of jokes that went over my head or I just didn't find funny, but a lot of people in the audience did find funny. But I did enjoy the chemistry between him and
Pedro Pascal.
And I liked like the dynamics between the two. I thought the story kind of went there was like a lot of things happening with his character. This idea of like being this actor who wants to get this role and then is thrown into this action adventure that kind of leads down this path of figuring out some deep stuff with his family. And I just thought, I wish it was just focused on him and not the whole family dynamic and not the whole acting, like being this actor who needs to find a role. I just wish it was just, I'm Nicolas Cage. I'm here to kind of be this guy for you for the next how many days in Spain and go on this weird adventure. So I don't know. I didn't find the story that engaging for myself.
Okay. Shay, how about yourself?
Yeah, very similar to Anthony, where you said, you wish the film kind of focused more on just Nick Cage himself. The story tends to deviate here and there to show you other things. And I feel like at certain points it becomes a like a mashup of different clips and scenes that are just occurring with no connective tissue. Like the beginning of this film where you start with the kidnapping to the very end, you kind of forget that the beginning of this film even occurred. It just kind of starts to go into something else. I enjoyed Nick Cage a lot as a child, and lately the movies he's been doing, they've been hit or miss, but I guess more misses than hits lately. But he still has a very loyal following, and that's what kind of makes this movie so exciting. I enjoyed his performance. I thought he was really fun. I thought there was a lot of good elements to it, but yes, not all the jokes landed for me. There were some great moments with Pedro Pascal. If anything, I think Pedro Pascal was the person in this film for me that sold it. Like, he was so funny and so entertaining to watch. I did find it funny that this is a movie about him playing a caricature of himself, and yet his agent is played by Neil Patrick Harris, who is famous for playing a caricature of himself in Harold and Kumar.
Right.
So it was a unique kind of like a tie-in that they did. But this movie, I think it has a lot of prospect for it, but I wish it committed to the weirdness of what it could have had the potential to be. There's great moments in it, but there's always this little feeling of, I feel like they could have pushed it a little further.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me, that I love that Nicolas Cage is playing a fictionalized version of himself. I just kind of wish this movie went weirder, because it kind of just turns into like an action kind of buddy comedy, which is fun. And I love the dynamic between Pedro and Nicolas Cage in this film. I think they're fantastic together. They're a great pairing. But I think the movie sometimes forgets that like Nicolas Cage is playing himself in this, and I think they could have leaned into the weirdness more. You get to see Nicolas Cage obviously have a lot of his films referenced throughout this movie. You see Nicolas Cage talk to a version of himself in this movie too, which is really fun to see. But then it kind of just goes into a little bit of more of a generic buddy comedy rather than, leaning more into the meta elements of it. And yeah, like what Anthony said earlier in our discussion, there were a lot of jokes in this movie, which I think a lot of them I think were really funny, but also you had also a bunch that were just like, that either went over my head or they kind of kept coming back to something, and I'm like, oh, this wasn't really funny the first time, but now we're coming back to it over and over and over again. But I think Nicolas Cage, as always, is great, and he never gives a bad performance. Like he had that quote not too long ago where he was talking about like, yeah, he did a lot of movies just to support his family, but he never phoned it in. Nicolas Cage will never phone in a performance because I don't think he's capable of that. He's Nicolas fucking Cage. He's always going to show up and at least do something interesting. And there's a lot of craziness in this. I think the movie's at its best when it's focusing on Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal together. When we kind of start bringing in the family elements, and especially the CIA or FBI or whatever U.S. agencies in this with Tiffany Haddish and Ike Barinholtz. They really,
forgot they were in this.
Yeah, and that's the thing, especially Ike Barinholtz, who just, I think he's even the scenes that he's in, he's not really a presence. So I think that it felt a little shoehorned in, that element of it. I think there was an opportunity to get really weird with this movie, and who like, and really lean into like, okay, who's really in control, what's really going on here. And there's some really cool aspects in this movie, but as a whole, like, yeah, you start to be like, okay, this is just wasting time. And I think with a movie that clocks in under 2 hours, this movie, I think, still could have lost about 10, 15 minutes easily.
Could have been an hour and a half. I think one of the things that kind of also took me out of the film sometimes, and this is something that happens in movies that are, about actors playing themselves or caricature themselves. When you have other actors in the movie that are famous enough or are well known enough, it sometimes kind of pulls you out. I feel like
it does. It's like the entourage effect, right?
Like seeing Tiffany Haddish, seeing Ike Barinholtz, even seeing Neil Patrick Harris. I was like, oh, are they playing themselves or are they playing
actors?
A
or different
character?
people. Yeah.
And when they don't have big enough roles, it almost stands out a bit too much sometimes.
Definitely,
yeah. Tiffany Haddish and Ike were just kind of random. Like they were in barely enough scenes, and it felt like they did all their filming in one day. And that was it.
Right. Yeah. So, but when this movie is, focusing on Pedro and Nick just having like a friendship with one another and just kind of being crazy with one another, that's when I think this movie is most entertaining. When you're introducing all those other elements, it's taking away, I think, from the core idea of what this movie could be and could have been.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we get to our final recommendations of The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent? We're good to go. Okay, Shay, I'm going to get you to start us off with your final recommendation.
I think if you're a huge fan of Nicolas Cage, you're going to be seeing this movie regardless. But for everybody else, if you haven't watched Nicolas Cage movie in a while, this is something that's great to put on when it's available for streaming. Put it, add it to your queue, and say, hey, I'll definitely get to this one night. I think it's a great just movie you watch just randomly once, and then you're good.
Awesome, Anthony. How about yourself?
Yeah, this would be a add to the queue, unless you have pictures of Nick Cage in your bedroom. And,
if you have that Nicolas Cage pillow.
A wax figure of him holding the golden guns from Face Off. I would definitely, this is definitely a watch it on a streaming service, 100%. Like I would watch this if this came to Netflix or to Prime. But this is not something you need to run to the theaters to watch.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. If you are a massive Nicolas Cage fan, I think this is the movie for you. This movie kind of felt like a fever dream in the beginning when it was Nicolas Cage, auditioning for a role, and it was at its best when it was leaning into the craziness of it. But like you guys, I think this is going to be a great movie to watch when it eventually does come to a streaming service later this year, most likely. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for listening to the movie podcast review of The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Don't forget, you can catch a brand new episode of the Movie Podcast every single week, and look out for our review episodes and all the latest movies and series. Make sure to follow us at The Movie Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Letterboxd. And don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, join our Discord, and write into the show at
hello@TheMoviePodcast.ca.
Check out our show notes for all of those links and more. Don't forget, you could watch us on YouTube and you could buy merch to support the show. Thank you so much for listening again. That was This Time with The Movie Podcast, and we'll see you next.